sitting there doing emails, answering phone calls, you know, greeting visitors, taking care of people who come to see me. And it was somewhere 9:30, 9:25 or so. One of my coworkers came over and asked me if I knew what was going on in New York. I said no. She said, well, you got to come see. She had a TV to monitor the House and the Senate as part of her job. And so, you know, I just kind of, you know, worked my way into the middle of the people standing there. You know, and I'm just standing there looking at this TV like, you know, in utter disbelief like everybody else was. And stood there for, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes, 4 minutes, walked back to my desk, called my wife, you know, see if she knew what was going on. And she said she did. She was at work at the time. And, you know, we talked for a couple of minutes. And I said, well, look, honey, I got to go. I love you. I'll see you tonight. She said, okay. She said, but do me a favor. I said, what's that? She said, for the rest of the day, work from underneath your desk. Yeah. I mean, I laughed. I chuckled. I said, yeah, sure, honey, I will. I says, I love you, and I'll see you tonight. I walked back over to where my coworker desk was, and again, worked my way into the middle of everybody, and just was kind of sat down on the edge of the desk. And I had been sitting there rather, you know, just maybe a minute or two, when I stood up, and I actually was started to leave, because I turned to my right and started to leave when the plane hit the outside of the building. It was just this tremendous explosion. You know, I spent 20 years in the Army. I've been around tanks and you know, artillery pieces and stuff like that. Not that I was a combat guy, but you know, I'm used to hearing loud noises. This is like nothing I'd ever heard before. It was just a tremendous boom, and it's just a ball of fire just went rolling across the ceiling from behind me and from my left, and I was blown through the air. You know, I now know that I was about 30 feet away from where I was standing, and because through, you know, recreating and looking at diagrams and remembering in my mind as to trying to crawl out, because the room was just, it was instantly black from the smoke. It was down to about a foot from the floor. I can't see anything. I can't breathe. You know, the temperature, the doctor said, was 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. So to breathe even a little bit, just burn, and you got the black choking smoke. And I just, you know, my first thought was that my greatest fear in life was at hand. I've always been afraid to die in a fire. I've always thought it was the most horrific way to die. And here it was. I was going to die in a fire. And then my second thought was that I'd never see my bride again, because I'd been married just 15 and a half months. And so, you know, I just started crawling. I was like this. And somehow I ended up in our conference room, which was 30 feet away from where I was. And about that time, somebody grabbed the back of my leg. And then I heard a voice say, go out through this one particular door, which was just happened to be the one that was farthest away from where we were. And I just crawled towards that voice. I didn't hesitate, didn't think a second about it, take a second thought. I just headed towards that voice, and thankfully it was in the right direction, and I just crawled until I ran headfirst into a wall. I knew where I was at that point, because the farther away I crawled, the lighter it got. The smoke wasn't as thick and as choking, and the sprinklers were on, because I'm crawling through water. Because the sprinklers up where we were all destroyed from the blast. And I crawled out turned right, when I ran head first, turned right, went out to the 4th corridor, and then eventually made my way out to the center courtyard. I didn't have any real comprehension of my injuries until I got out of the space. And I made it out to the 4th corridor, and there were 2 solid wood doors that had been blown out and were laying in the corridor. And I remember this because it felt so cool on my face that I just laid down on it. And then I stood up, and I looked to my right, back up towards the attack site, knew I couldn't come that way, so I turned left, headed towards the center of the building. And I looked down, and as I was walking, I could see just strings of my skin, like sausages that you've cooked too long, that the casings have exploded, is just hanging down off all my fingers on both hands. And so I walked like I was a doctor. You know, my hands held up like this. and I just walked towards the center of the building until a coworker of mine, Vic, came along. He had helped carry somebody else out, and he and somebody else had rushed back, and they were holding the smoke door open. And Vic started walking up the hallway to find other people, and he said he came upon me, and he walked up to me, and you know, he tells me, because again, I don't remember a lot. He said, "John, how are you doing?" He's never told me what my response was, but he said he knew at that point I probably couldn't make it out by myself. So he said he went to put his hand on my back because he couldn't grab my hand, he couldn't grab my arm. And he said he could feel the heat coming off my back from a foot away. So he took his index finger and just put it right in the small of my back and just kind of pushed me along. And then I was passed off, you know, to a couple of other people until they got me out into the center courtyard where they were evacuating people to. They set me down underneath a tree to wait for the medical personnel here in the building to get to the center courtyard. And that's where they cut all my clothes off of me. And then I was just sitting there, and then I remember a female doctor. And she had a skirt on and a long white lab coat. She walked up and she said, "He goes first," pointing to me. That was my first indication that, you know, I was probably more seriously injured than I thought I was, and maybe just my hands, because, you know, they always send the most critically injured people first. You know, after they took me off the respirator in the ICU at the hospital, for 2 weeks I was sneezing and coughing up just black crud. Every time I sneezed or any time I coughed, I was bringing this black crud up out of my lungs. I survived because most people don't think about September 11th until it gets to be this time of year. They really don't. And you know, unless you were personally involved or personally affected, you know, they just go about their daily lives. I think I survived so that people won't forget. So I can talk to you people and tell you about the events that happened that day, so that we don't forget the events that happened that day and the people who were murdered, because that's what they were. They were murdered that day. They weren't just killed, they were murdered. You know, my life has been changed in that I don't take a day for granted anymore. You know, I give thanks to every single day. At some point during the day, I look up and just say thank you, because I was standing in the middle of 5 people, and I'm the only one that survived. You know, so I just give thanks.